Conrad Hilton's last words were, "Leave the shower curtain on the inside of the tub." Steve Jobs even wanted the circuit boards on the inside of Macs or phones to look elegant, even if customers would never see them.
There is so much to learn when you hear about the path that people have taken and what led to their decisions and what influenced them.
It wasn't just a device to Steve Jobs, and it wasn't just a hotel for Conrad Hilton. They were both absolutely obsessed with customer experience.
Part of the reason why biography is great is because you get the little human-centric details, right?
They listened and they observed in a way that put them in the shoe of the customer. It's always about putting the customer first.
That's what you should be doing with all of your marketing. Cut through the noise, stop the scroll, show people something they haven't seen before.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
Listen to this. Listen to this.
Memorable?
Well, then be less boring.
Boring?
Remarkable.
Oh.
I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. You're listening to Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from Steve Jobs and Conrad Hilton with the help of our special guest, VP of Marketing and Communications at TNS. Sharon, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, excited to have you on the show, chatting about two of our favorite topics here. I should say maybe one of them we've talked about more than the other, so it'll be fun to blend both ideas together. And obviously, we'll talk about your role at TNS. So why the heck did you pick Steve Jobs and Conrad Hilton to talk about today?
So just generally, I love memoirs and I love biographies. Actually, just picking these two was hard enough. I had a whole other list of ones that I would do. I think that there is so much to learn when you hear about the path that people have taken and what led to their decisions and what influenced them. And I think sometimes when someone is successful, it's hard to imagine all these individual piece parts that had to come together to make it happen. Sometimes it's vision, sometimes it's grit, hard work, it's luck. Sometimes it's some combination of all of that. The saying, fact is always stranger than fiction. And my mom has always told me that everybody has a story to tell. And I think that she's right about it. And it's through those stories that there's some very powerful lessons and there's some really great insights that are shared. And when I read biographies and memoirs, I'm always amazed at those little moments where you're that I can see that trajectory just changed. I love to hear people's stories from their own point of view.
Yeah, there ain't nothing better. There's no better way to learn, I think, than back. Well, I think that and this is already starting off with a great marketing lesson here, which is part of the reason why biography is great is because you get the little human-centric details, right? Of they were making this decision while their, kid was in the hospital or whatever it is. There's just so much more human sides of it. Whereas when you read a business case study, it removes all the fluff, but it's the fluff is the stuff that's memorable and the stuff that's life, right? So it's you're not making all of those decisions without the rest of it.
And it's not linear, right? When you read the business, it's I had an idea. It is successful, right? And when you read the biography, it's this was messy and complicated. This is the result that I got to. So I find it fascinating. And
we'll get into the two people here in a little bit, but I tend to agree that, getting the first person accounts as much as humanly possible is so valuable. And the job of the person, doing the biography. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your role at TNS.
So I can tell you I love what I do. I feel really, really fortunate that the path that I had taken had led me here. It definitely wasn't, my childhood self did not say I wanted to be in B2B telecom marketing. I think, again, your life, right? I was born and raised in New Jersey. It's telecom and pharma, right? Those are basically your kind of paths if you just happen to be born in the state. And I love technology. So it was kind of an easy path for me. In the current position, we do B2B marketing for the telecommunications industry. From the outside, I'd say that looks really pleasant and boring. But from the inside, it is fascinating. It's so game-changing. When you think about what we are doing today, it is literally we're writing the front page of our history book, right? All the technology changes that are happening and everything that's happening in telecom, and all these lessons that we're learning and how the global economy is shifting because of it, right? Our grandchildren will read about that. And this is the moment that is all happening. So I work for a company that makes software that makes the phone systems work, right? Every call, every text message that goes through our software. And we all take it for granted, just like when we go into a room and we open a light switch and the light goes on, you don't see everything that has to go into making that possible, similar to the phone. I get to work with some scary smart people who are brilliant at what they do, and their genius just inspires your thinking. So just getting exposed to that right at the front line, hey, could you imagine a world where, right?
Mm-hmm.
I live in that kind of every day. And it's always changing, right? Telecom's changing. There's these fraudsters who are abusing the network, and they're siphoning money from grandma, and customers' expectations are changing, and technology is being disruptive. So it's not a job that you get to kind of sit still at, which again, for my personality, works really well. But it's just down to brass tacks. I do all the typical marketing stuff. It's PR, internal comms, customer comms, analyst relations, the web, digital, SEO, SEM, events, product marketing. It all kind of falls under our purview. And try to figure out how to position the things that we are doing for the telecoms industry, not only here in the United States, but globally, and how that can be positioned to make money for the companies that need to make the money, but to change the lives for the people that use the software that we create.
Meredith, who the heck are Steve Jobs and Conrad Hilton?
I've never heard of either of them.
I know, never heard of either of them. They're both incredibly famous entrepreneurs that have built global brands that are still around today. Steve Jobs, of course, we know from co-founding Apple.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone.
Conrad Hilton founded Hilton Hotels in 1919.
Hilton earned his early success by purchasing hotels when they were unprofitable, and then turning each one into a gold mine. Hilton's hotels provided sparkling clean accommodations, motivated staff, and great value for the guest. The Hilton organization created a whole new way of minimizing costs and maximizing service to the guest. No one had ever seen anything like it.
Despite being in very different spheres, one in technology, one in hospitality, right? They share a bunch of things in common. They were both absolutely obsessed with customer experience, or how customers felt using an Apple product or staying at Hilton Hotel. As part of that, every little detail has to be just so and consistent. So reportedly, and this might be apocryphal, Conrad Hilton's last words were, "Leave the shower curtain on the inside of the tub." So he paid attention to every little thing. There was room layouts that he was involved in, figuring out lighting, even where outlets were placed. And likewise, Steve Jobs even wanted the circuit boards on the inside of Macs or phones to look elegant, even if customers would never see them. He literally spent half an hour trying to decide on the specific color of gray used on restroom signs in Apple stores. And then he even complained that the yellow gradient on the second O in the Google logo looked wrong on the iPhone screen. So very, very detail oriented, almost obsessive. And a lot of people thought that these are just little tiny details and who cares, whatever. But to them, it was consistency in these tiny details leads to trust and customer loyalty. And it kind of made me think of how you can literally go to any Starbucks kiosk or anything like that, and that you're going to get the same tasting drink, same consistency. So that same idea applies to both Steve Jobs and Conrad Hilton's work. And they we're just looking at the products, right? They're looking at this whole systems, the vertical that they're working within. So it wasn't just a device to Steve Jobs or a computer, and it wasn't just a hotel for Conrad Hilton. Jobs helped design the hardware, the software, retail around the products and services. And Conrad Hilton standardized branding and operating procedures and service standards. So just like with Starbucks, like customers know what they're getting basically anywhere in the world. But they were also really tough bosses, both of them. Steve Jobs, and this sounds like a nightmare to me, Steve Jobs would critique employees' work publicly, but it wasn't just critiquing. He'd say things like, an idea was shit, or he'd say, have you thought this through at all? That like cuts to the core. I think I'd start crying. But he would also like fire people after one interaction because he would think that like they don't get it, right? They don't get what we're after or what we're all about. Some people loved him because he would inspire devotion in people who would want to, please to make him proud. But others really hated him because they found him like unpredictable and like quite terrifying. In the same vein, Conrad Hilton gave really strict directions to managers on how they should greet guests, everything to the greeting to like even like lighting hotel rooms. And if they deviated even a little bit, he would fire them, dismiss them. And he often also like overrode managers' decisions because he knew what guests wanted. So he would sort of step on their toes and obviously would rub some people the wrong way. Interestingly for him, he saw hospitality as more of like a moral mission. He was very like devout, religious, and to him it like wasn't just a business. It was really this. It was in line with his morals as well. So I thought that was super interesting. But all of that said, I'm wondering, Sharon, what you see as similarities between the two and what we can draw from them lesson-wise.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some lessons in there. Both men were definitely passionate about what they were doing. And I think that that's just an important message for everybody. You really cannot fake it. And I'm like I've always been super passionate about technology. And so I feel blessed to be able to be doing what I'm doing. And I know that I'd be miserable trying to pretend that I cared about something else. And so they loved what they were doing. They loved what they were creating. And I think that any of the missteps and learnings or the stumbles that they had actually made them stronger and a little bit more passionate about what it was that they do. I tell my team all the time, try it, right? And I think that they did a bit of this. And if it doesn't work, you've heard this a million times, right? You probably learn more when it doesn't go the way you expect than the way that it does, but there's still something to learn there. And as a manager, you need to like stand by that. Hey, try it and encourage it. But then you can't reprimand them if it doesn't go right. And it sounds like maybe in some of the things that you've uncovered, there was a little bit of reprimanding there too. I think they also pushed the envelope, right? No didn't really seem to be in either of their like vernacular. It was always like, no today, but we'll figure it out for tomorrow. It almost, especially with jobs, like you tell him no, that's a yes.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to prove you right. And there was that famous story when the iPhone 3 came out where he was talking about all these great features and functionality that the iPhone was going to do. The network could not support anything he was saying. So at the time it was on AT&T only, and AT&T's network team was like, oh my God, like we have to deliver on this because people believe what Steve Jobs is saying. And if it doesn't happen, they're going to think it was us, right? And it can't be us. And just by his words motivated this entire shift change on technology. So I think that's one marketing lesson. The other one, which I agree that you also touch on, is they know their audience. They listened and they observed in a way that put them in the shoe of the customer. And it's so easy when you're in a company to not see from the other side, right? It's so easy to get that insular view. People get really enamored with like the widget that they're creating, right? And I think both Hilton and Jobs did a great job at watching, listening, and then creating. In tech, we always say, well, we can build it, but should we? Like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. Or like, does it even have a problem that we're solving? Or is this just something that you felt like you wanted to do today? Hilton and Jobs did the opposite, right? So Hilton definitely, so his audience was a business traveler. That was his original, right? And these are people who had to travel. These weren't people who wanted to travel. So when he knew that like private rooms, comforts of home, security, expectations, that consistency. Like, I'm going to go to Hilton because I need to be alert and I need to do well in the meeting that I'm going to, because the reason I'm traveling is for business. And I don't need to worry about, like, is it safe? Is it clean? Right. And from that, he was able to build, more of the brand. Jobs, definitely, right? The whole 1,000 songs in your pocket thing was because he's walking around going like, there's a lot of CDs happening here. There's all these tapes. People are pirating like stuff. They don't want to steal it, but they really know their option. What if we gave them an option? Would they be willing to do that? Because he understood people's desire for music and their willingness to try all these different ways to get it. If he could package that up, is that a saleable product? And obviously the answer is yes, right? Again, I work with just actually on my team, and the gentleman who runs our web team always talks about UX, the user experience. Jobs obviously defines that, versus a UI, which most software engineers in old-time telecom lean towards. And the example he always gives us a ketchup bottle. So when you think of ketchup, and there's a glass bottle, that is the UI, right? It holds ketchup. But you have to turn it upside down and kind of hit it with a knife and like stick the knife in it to get the ketchup out of it. But it does its job, right? It holds the ketchup. The UX is the plastic ketchup bottles, right? That are upside down and you can squeeze it with one hand and you can drop it and it doesn't break. People will be willing to pay more for that UX experience, even the most simplest thing like ketchup. And Jobs obviously brought that into technology. And I think in many ways, Hilton brought that into hospitality at a turn of the century when it literally just didn't even exist. So I think that's the second one. I think I have 3. What would the third one be? I guess it's listen, know your audience, and be willing to, shift as the market shifts. Because again, Hilton went through huge economic downturns, right? Where traveling really was impacted financially as the wars were happening and such. And you needed to be able to really, again, stay connected and understand where those shifts are happening and how to move with them in order to survive past them.
Were there any stories like when you read their biographies that like jumped out to you that were, I don't know, that you can remember sort of offhand?
Yes. So Jobs was the easy one, right? So early in the biography, he says he remembers the day that he realized he was smarter than his father, who he had always admired. And it was like that moment where it changed I say this all the time. It was that moment where it changed the trajectory of his life. And as a result, it changed the trajectory of all of ours. Like, I often wonder, what if he, because he did feel guilty about it, right? Like, and he talks about that. What if he reacted differently? What if that realization put him down a different path? What if his parents weren't comfortable with that he was adopted, but still like their son was smarter than him and tried to like suppress it? They didn't. They fed into it. He talks about getting him to the right schools and exposing him to the right people and really pouring into him to make sure that he had what he needed. I think that is an important lesson for managers, because oftentimes a manager could feel that their employees should not know as much as they do. But I always feel like my employee, like, I'm not hiring you because you can do what I do. I'm hiring you because you can do what I cannot do, right? And you need to be comfortable kind of with that. Jobs kind of talks through it. Later, though, when you go through his life, it was that belief, though, that ultimately could have impacted his demise, right? He believed he was the smartest guy in the room. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he wasn't taking the traditional medical advice. He believed he was smarter than that. By the time he realized that he needed to go that path, popular opinion says it was too late, and he had waited too long. And so that same strong-willed, passionate piece of his personality that drove him early in his career, if he could have just been a little bit more open-minded, maybe it would have extended his life. And I often wonder, what else would we as a society have benefited from if he maybe took some medical advice a little bit sooner.
Yeah, very much Icarus, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I realized that I was smarter than my father at a very young age. And then as I become an adult and a father, I've realized how wrong I was at every single gate and along the way. And I think about it every night. You know, they say youth is wasted on the young. It is crazy, you know, getting older and reflecting on all those things. But yeah, I think I say that all in jest, but I think it is a really great story, and I think it's a great lesson, because I think for a lot of people, whether or not you realize you're smarter than, you know, your parents, or, you know, your boss, or whatever, or even what the term smarter than someone even means, I think that it is a really important point to realize that probably the people that you look up to, or, you know, your idols, or the people that are even like the ones that we're talking about now, we're probably making a lot of stuff up. And then I think like that's the part for me. Like, there's so much, when I was younger, there's so much mystery around like the creation of things, or, you know, like you read the Joy Luck Club and you're like, how does this story even come about? Like, was she sitting there writing this story with like a gilded pen, you know, in a palace or whatever? You know, it's like, no, it's like she was just writing it wherever she was writing a thing, right? Or you know, or whoever you're, you know, Steve Jobs, or, you know, like we sort of romanticize the work in the garage, but as someone who's sitting in a garage and has done startups in garages, like, it is fun, and you have to embrace the ride.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. And the reason is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it, you don't really love it, you're going to give up.
But like, it also is not glamorous, and I think that I think that one of the great things about biography is to like understand the sort of like the icky, the smelly, the sort of the terrible parts of the job, the times where they felt like they were lost, the times where they felt like they were going to give up, the times where, you know, the idea that ended up becoming the $1 billion idea everyone thought was stupid, including the person who was making it. So I think, you know, realizing that, you know, hey, I think I might have something here, or I think I might be really smart, or whatever it is a powerful thing, I think, to scratch the itch and to say, like, what if I could push myself a little bit further, or a lot further?
It's funny because you know, in business, you're always in meetings, and it's like, what's our strategy? What's the next, you know, $50 million deal or whatever? And I always ground it with, when Jeff Bezos first started, he was selling books, right? He wasn't trying to sell everything to everybody everywhere in the entire world in like 24 hours. And I think if he thought that was his vision, it probably wouldn't have happened, right? But there was like, hey, I've you know, got past this phase or this stone. I wonder, hey, books, probably bookmarks. Hey, books, printed books, maybe digital books, right? And so there was this like constant eye-opening, going back to listen to the audience, understand what's happening in the market, identify the challenge that's providing a convenience to the end person. And all of a sudden, like, through baby steps, man, people will look back and be like, oh, Bezos, right? It's like, no, he was like selling books. People thought it was crazy, right? Going up against like some of the major bookstores at a time when digital was just coming, right? So, and we see it with Netflix, we saw it with Blockbuster. Like, there's just so many people who didn't see the shift. You know, the Kodak was obviously Polaroid. That when you see the ones that do, you wonder, was it dumb luck? Was it their ability to listen? Was it serendipity, right? I don't think there's an answer. But I do think that the one thing that they could not possibly do is ever stay complacent. I think even if everything looked perfect to them, they were still trying to figure out what was next. You saw it with Hilton, right? Like, he would test things. He talks about that in his book. Like, he would testing at his flagship, because if you're at the top luxury, if you're at the Waldorf, right, then you can then figure out, okay, how do I now bring, if those people want this experience, why wouldn't everybody want this experience? And how do I kind of scale that one way or the other, and make sure that I provide that consistency, comfort, security, brand message? they never said, okay, we're done, which is pretty interesting and probably hard to do, right? I think that comes from the passion. You really have to love what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that like the immense sense of pride and ownership, I think is very clear. I mean, Hilton, I mean, they're both very similar in this way, but Hilton, you do really understand. I mean, his name's on the building, right? And it's like, I saw an interesting thing. They were talking about how, you know, companies that of a certain age were all called the name after the founders, like Henry Ford and Hilton and whatever. Because that's like how you did stuff back then, right? Like who you were is your company, right? And they're sort of indistinguishable from each other. Whereas, you know, as time went on, then, you know, companies became Google and, you know, other sorts of things, Amazon, et cetera. And they're sort of became a bit divorced. And I think for someone like Hilton, who really feels that it is a reflection of him personally. And it's like, if a light doesn't work or if the lighting isn't correct, that is a reflection of him personally. And I think it's a good proxy, I think, in today's sort of like modern marketing world, because I think that there's a lot of mental scapegoating that we do on marketing teams to say like, well, that person approved it and that person said this, and that sort of like watered down nature of trying to just like chip away at something and to just make it so boring or lame or just like rote or whatever it is. And I just think that there's a lot of room to just take a lot of pride of ownership and just say, it doesn't need to go to my boss to get, you know, approved. I can say this isn't good enough. You know, like I can say that like the campaign that we're working on like isn't great. Like this isn't fantastic work. This isn't, you know, even potentially worth putting out there. And I know that on the other side, there's, you know, maybe we get paralysis by analysis, and we can get into that here in a second. But I do think that pride of ownership and just saying like, hey, I am attached to this thing, right? It's like, I'm not just attached to the outcomes of this thing. I am attached to the thing. And if I ship something that's bad, it is a reflection of me too, not just the team broadly. Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, again, turn of the century, so personal brand wasn't necessarily what it is right now, but it probably is what defined it. To your point, when he opened his first hotel like in Texas because of the oil boom, did he think this is what the future was going to be? No, right? So why not put my name on it? I think, you know, and then it just grows organically. It doesn't make sense to change it. So Honda is another example, right? So there's a lot of examples of how that happened. And you're right. I do see the shift now that when people are building a company, they're like, let's name the company and brand the company. And maybe there's a danger in that because it does distance you from that personal piece of, hey, I'm accountable for this. My name's up on that building, or, you know, my personal reputation's at stake on that one. So I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it's an interesting kind of Rubik's Cube to turn around and kind of figure out if the name really does drive some level of accountability and passion by the owner.
I think it really does. And I think, you know, we talk a lot about like building a founder brand and the importance of that and everything. I actually think this is like one of the things that I'm most opinionated on in terms of like what is going to be important for the next 10 years. And I think like the rise of the individual is going to be far more important than it was for the previous decade or you know, or 20 years, because it's just at the end of the day, like originality and you know, developing thoughts that are unique and differentiated and not out there yet is sort of the antithesis of what the LLMs are doing. And so therefore, like getting cutting edge thoughts about the world comes from individuals, right? It's like, it just doesn't come from brands. And it used to, and you used to like find the article and go to the website and do those things. And now it just increasingly comes from people. I mean, we've been saying email newsletters are dead and like forever, right? for years and years, and then Substack and Beehive and all these things pop up under our noses, right? Where people are paying now hundreds of dollars a year for other people's newsletters, even though, quote, newsletters are dead. It's like, no, bad newsletters are dead.
Exactly.
The newsletter, your company newsletter that sucks, that is dead. That is dusted, you know? But the company newsletter that's fantastic, that's a must read, is very much alive. And so I think that written from a person's perspective and their view on the world and how they're going to be making decisions, I think is an important piece of this. And like, you know, like these two people are inseparable from their companies for good reason. And like, at the end of the day, like that's what makes the myths of, you know, business titans. And I think like, that's the legacy, right? Is like forever, anyone who ever works at Apple or ever works at Hilton can go back and be like, if Steve was here, would he like this? And that's what even happens in the like in investing. Like if you're thinking of buying Apple stock, they're talking about that, right? Like it's so core to the company that they're inseparable. And no surprise that, you know, those companies have a really high standard still.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked at Verizon for a bunch of years and worked at their headquarters here in New Jersey. And when you walk into the cafeteria, it must be a 20-foot wall with their credo on it. And every day you walk by it and you read it. And it's subliminal, right? But like there is a cultural shift just seeing that content every day and saying like, that's what, as a representative of this company, that's what I need to stand for. And it's subtle. It really is. It's designed. It's like really more of a piece of artwork than anything else. But it's just that like subtle reminder of, you know, why we're here, what we're doing, what we are supposed to deliver to our customers. You know, it falls short on some people, right? Not everybody is in the right job. And I think that's the other, you know, for anybody who feels like they're in the wrong job. And again, one of the other ones I didn't listen to is Ina Garten, who is the Contessa. And she was like doing what anybody would love, right? She was working at the White House, right? And she's like, this job is just like killing me. I want to go like bake cookies, right? And then people are like, you're working at the White House. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't give this up. And by just letting go of what other people expected from her, and she had a great support system with her husband, Jeffrey, but like it allowed her to actually do what she wanted. And they always say, find what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right?
Right.
And then that passion, that desire, it's contagious. Just like when you don't want to do something, it's cancerous. It's like a toxin that radiates throughout the team. And so I think it is important for people to be self-aware of like, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? You know, what is my comparative advantage here? And then the job of the managers, the leadership of the team to make sure that they're like kind of giving them, the team members, everything that they need to kind of flourish. We all know the people who are in jobs that your friends, your neighbors, your family members, your coworkers, you know who are in the wrong roles. It'd be great if you could just shake them and be like, listen, go, just take the leap now. Go do something that you're passionate about. Everything about your personality and your life will change when you love what you do.
Totally.
But I think it's a risk that so many people are really, really either they don't have the opportunity or they just don't have the nerve. Or maybe it's both. I don't know.
I'll tell you what I love. A pina colada. Meredith, have you ever had one of those things? Pina colada?
I have. They're delicious.
Created at the Hilton.
There you go.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's right. Every pina colada you've had is thanks to old Conrad Hilton's legacy.
I love it.
Who knew?
Yeah, famous barman. 1949, Hilton International was born in Puerto Rico, and legendary barman Ramon Monchito Marrero creates the pina colada in 1954.
There you go.
You want some more Hilton facts? Sure you do. So Conrad Hilton, you may think this guy dead set on being in the hotel business. He leaves the house one day in 1919 to go buy a bank. And on the way, he buys the Mobley, a local hotel instead. I mean, come on. It's so good.
Well, I went down to buy a bank right after the war, 1919, in a little town in Cisco, Texas. And the banker had agreed to sell me this little small bank, and then he raised me $5,000 And it made me mad, and I was staying at this hotel, and I happened to ask the hotel proprietor how much money he was making, and he told me he was making a lot of money. So I says, I'd like to buy your hotel. Here's where I don't become a banker, and I'm going to become a hotel manager.
He didn't even want to buy a hotel, but he ended up in the business for the rest of his life. Amazing.
And think about the bank he could have purchased and what would have happened to that in 1929, just a decade later, right? Like the whole trajectory changes. Just by coincidence? I don't know. Pete? I'm not sure.
1943, Hilton, first coast-to-coast hotel chain in the United States. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
All this stuff that, like, you know, I mean, it's crazy because, I mean, in a lifetime, right? All this stuff happened. And, like, I mean, I didn't ever think about, like, that hotel chains weren't a thing, like, when I was growing up, right?
Right.
All this stuff is new. It's just crazy. First hotelier, is that how you pronounce it? To be on Time Magazine, kind of fun. And a bunch of other cool stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I love the bank story. I love that he goes to buy a bank and buys a hotel instead, and the rest is history. It's just, like, amazing. I think that the attention to detail stuff, I think that there is this, like, razor sharp edge on attention to detail. And whether it's Conrad Hilton or Steve Jobs. And I'll use an example from my time in the military. When I was in the Army, I did not understand why I needed to have short hair. I'm from California. I did not like having short hair. I did not like having a buzzed head. I didn't like any of that stuff. My hair was generally on the longer side of the allowed regulations. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why you couldn't have a beard. Didn't make sense to me. And it was explained to me that the reason why you have short hair and the reason why you have a shaved face, amongst other reasons, but the biggest reason is that if an NCO walks up and they see a private with little stubble on their chin or hair that's on regulations, if they can't do that, then they probably can't do a lot of other stuff. And so it's the canary in the coal mine to say, this soldier is jacked up. There's something off about this kid. And it's true. And, like, that is, I think there's so many times in marketing where we obsess over the color of the second G in Google, which, you know, perhaps to our detriment. You know, Steve Jobs was making something for, you know, a billion people. So maybe it's a little bit more serious for that. But we want to take that same rigor to something that doesn't require the rigor. And what I think that we see a lot of is plans and briefs. And I think that, like, we way over index on having presentations that go to leadership that have every single question answered and every single thing. But in the real world, it's like that, like, as soon as that stuff goes out, you don't know how it's going to respond. And if you spend a committee of people to figure out the shade of green, you know, for a particular campaign, there's probably diminishing returns there. And yet you do, as a leader, need to have the things that you're going to check, right? And it's like, if the lighting isn't right in every room, then the customer experience is going to be off. There's other things that probably are off in the customer experience if that isn't right, because that means that there's no discipline around what type of bulbs you're buying, and there's no discipline around who's supplying those bulbs and where they're bought and how they're installed. And, like, there's all these other, you know, issues that sort of come up. And I think that marketing can be like that too. If the color green is wrong, like, why is that? Maybe there's other things that we see there. But I think by and large, after working with, you know, hundreds of B2B marketing teams, I think by and large, we're doing a little bit too much paint by numbers and doing arts and crafts for leadership to actually agree to the campaigns that we're doing, and not enough turns sort of like after it's live to, like, optimize, to think about new and creative ways to do stuff. And I think probably there's a balance there.
Well, and that actually ties to Hilton specifically, right? So he was not one to go sit in, you know, the Ivy Tower and wait for the dashboards to come in and the reports to come in. He would go into he talks about it, like, there's not like a moment where I went in and I talked to this guy, but he talks about how he goes into his properties unannounced and he would just watch, like, what is that interaction? How is that guest behavior? Like, what is that reaction of that guest from that? Did that person handle this properly? And he wasn't going to wait for like a whole bunch of people to put that report together and then cleanse it all up to tell the story that they need to tell and then deliver it, X number of months later and be like, everything's here, good to hear, nothing to see. He needed to see it himself. And then he needed to be able to make the adjustments right away when he felt like something wasn't right. Meredith was talking earlier, like he would like reprimand people, but he would also empower people and say, listen, we're not losing a customer over this. Right? Just make it right. This isn't about this transaction. This is about the lifetime value of this particular customer and their network of people, because that will radiate out. He understood this at a time when most people didn't really understand it. So I'll take a hit now. Maybe it's a financial hit. Maybe I give them some kind of perk or amenity because I need them to feel special. And I need them to think that it is the Hilton brand that made them feel so special. There's tons of examples about he walked those halls himself and he was not waiting for the report because the report isn't really going to tell him what he needs to know anyway. And it would probably be too late because most of those things have to be fixed in the moment they're happening. And the people on the front line need to know that they can do that. Jobs, on the other hand, was like, you don't even know what you need. I know what you need. And wait till you see it, right? There was that famous... There was a famous focus group with minivans and moms. I don't remember which brand it was. Yeah. And they were like, hey, what do you want like better about the minivan? And they're like, I don't know, like windows that go down faster, right? Like, because their frame of reference could only be what they saw, right? Yeah. But if they could just not be encumbered by that, that's where things like, let me put my foot underneath the bumper and the back opens up. Like, a mom is not going to think about that. But man, when you look at the mom carrying the baby and the bags and the purse, trying to open the door, and you're like, wow, what if that door could open without her having her hands? What could we do? That's where the innovation sometimes come from. I think, obviously car dealerships do that, but I think Jobs was really good at looking at people saying, what are they struggling with? And how do I make that experience better? Because when I do and they taste it, they're never going back.
You've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that?
I mean, there were music, like, portable music players. And he's like, oh my gosh, wait till you see how it could be. And he redefined it. Hilton the same way. The hotels were, to your point, there weren't chains. It wasn't safe. They didn't know what to expect. And standardizing that for the business travel, again, going back to knowing who your audience is and truly understanding what they need, is what kind of started to form that brand and then build it out more into they ultimately did the luxury piece of it as well. So I don't know, I just think it's fascinating, and it can only be done on the front lines. You need to see it, and you need to really understand the problem that needs to be solved, rather than to say, I've solved the problem you didn't know you had with this thing that you don't want. It's kind of clunky. It doesn't work all that well, but try it anyway. Like, we've seen the graveyard of all of those for far too long. So,
yeah, I think my final B2B takeaway for Conrad Hilton is that he was always trying to give people something that they hadn't seen before.
Exactly.
And that's like every marketer, right? It's like, that's what you should be doing with all of your marketing. Is like, cut through the noise, stop the scroll, show people something they haven't seen before. He does this 1947, first hotel in the world to install television in guest rooms. Like,
unheard of.
Yeah, unheard of, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot more marketers should think about those type of things. What in your campaigns can you show people that they've never seen before? This is like, Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast. He aims for his videos to show people stuff that they have never seen before, right? Like human racing a cheetah or whatever it is, right? It's like they've never seen that. So he wants to show that to them. And I think that the great innovators like Conrad Hilton, they're constantly trying to show people stuff they haven't seen before. And if you think they're great marketing teams, it's the same way, right? It's like why we love Liquid Death and their marketing so much, like why we love, Coca-Cola over the years or whatever. It's like they're just showing you stuff that you haven't seen before. And
but
most
that's
of the time,
like an emotional tie, right? It's like they get me, they understand me, because it's delicate, right? Like years ago when the Exxon Valdez happened or the BP blow up, and like those brands turned from a positive brand experience because it's an emotional tie, right? And protecting the brand, like when you think about companies like Coca-Cola or like any of like the longstanding brands, like they understand that they have to protect that emotional reaction that somebody has when they're standing in front of, a soda case, and they're like the Starbucks example that Meredith gives, like there's two coffee shops next to each other. Everybody knows the emotional pull is pulling him into whichever one is your favorite, right? And you don't care if it costs more. You don't care if the line is longer, right? You care that you're going to get what you expect and that you value it and that you're going to be satisfied by it. And that isn't a magic potion. That is a long-standing brand management task that people need to do. And it's always about putting the customer first. How do I make it more convenient? How do I make them emotionally tied to my brand and feel good about their participation in my ecosystem as a company? So I think Hilton did a lot to define that. Jobs, clearly as well. And there's lots of great examples of people who did it really well. For a long time, it was that Kodak moment until it wasn't. And same with Blockbuster, right? Like that was the place you went until it wasn't. And it also shows, again, going back to complacency, never sit still because nobody else is sitting still. And even if you're just a step ahead, once someone goes past you, it's going to be harder. And everybody wants to take down the person who's at the top. So you're everybody's target, right? And if you keep looking backwards and trying to copy instead of lead, that's another area of demise. You can't look back and be like, well, what does everybody else do? What does everybody else think? You just have to have confidence that you understand your audience, you understand where the puck is moving, and you're gonna keep going forward. And if other people want to, Elon Musk does this all the time. You got to take my patents, take them, right? Because I'm already on to 3 things that you haven't even thought about yet. I'm moving forward, right? Hard to do. Listen, like none of it's easy, but there's again, going back to biographies and memoirs, there's just so many moments when you're like, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that moment happened. And it kind of changed things.
I have not heard that if you want my patents, take them. That's amazing. That's really funny. That's so funny. I haven't heard that. Sharon, it's been wonderful having you on the show. Before we get out of here, I just want to know, how are you thinking about content in 2026 and what's working for audiences?
Well, I think it's everything we just talked about, right? So for me, it's all about telling stories. I definitely think people do not want to be sold to. I am not a fan of the bait and switch. Like, let me give you this long convoluted story, but then when you want to get the end of it, like here's gated content or it actually is frustrating to the customer. If you've got something to say it. If it doesn't sound on its own merit, it wasn't worth hearing, right? I think, again, I'm B2B, so it's a different kind of marketing strategy. We need to look at it to say, what's going on with our customer? What do they need to get promoted, or what do they need to be the rock star? And how do we help them elevate themselves in their business or help their business get elevated? Again, I go back to personas. For me, it's not Hilton did a great job, right? Like, it's not about, it's a job title, right? Like, I'm going to check the box on all of this, persona stuff. It's really like this deep-seated psychological profile of what makes them tick, what they're willing to pay for, like that, again, that emotional tie. Hilton did a great job, right? He understood the business traveler. He understood what they were dealing with, and what was important to them was to be refreshed and alert and comfortable and not, I have so many things to worry about. I don't want to have to also worry, am I in a safe place with a clean room? And like I'm brand loyal. I know when I'm picking hotels or when I'm picking car rental, like I'm just like, I'm going to this brand. I don't even shop for price because it's so the price points are sometimes are so close anyway that it's not worth my time to spend researching it, and it's not worth it if you make the wrong decision, right? So I think it still holds to me as a person. I do keep an eye on the competition, but again, as I said earlier, it's not to copy them. You know, there's a lot of noise and you could miss something that's really obvious to somebody else. And so sometimes by looking at the content that others are creating, you're like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize, maybe that's kind of like an issue. Again, pleasant and boring telecom, we create these codes that go into networks. It's super boring. Don't worry about it. But what we found that when we started to watch in the market was energy consumption was like skyrocketing with AI, right? Everybody's on the AI bucket. I'm not on the whatever bandwidth. I'm not on that. But okay, so it's draining all of our power resources, and then it's costing a lot of power money, and our networks are really power dependent. Hey, our codes actually give you information to reduce your power, right? Like, why don't we pivot our marketing message to deliver it into the telecom companies to say, listen, we know what you're dealing with. These power things are soaring at a rate that you can't control. But what you can control is what you have in your purview, and you already have this information available in your systems. Let us help you unlock it. So we will tell stories from their perspective so that they can understand what it means to them. That constant selling, it's not broken. Even if it's not perfect, if it's not broken, I'm not fixing it. I think that's most of where business people are. And so you need to kind of come in with a way that says, hey, I know what you're dealing with here. Let me explain to you how that might be solvable in a way that is reasonable, simple, elegant, whatever words that you want kind of to talk about there. So that's a lot of where my content strategy is, and where we kind of try to approach how we talk to customers, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many.
Amazing. Sharon, wonderful having you on the show. For our listeners, go check out TNS. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
Nothing to plug because that would go against everything I just said. But just general advice, right? I think that as I tell my team, never settle, always remain curious, and never be complacent. And I think if you keep those three things close to your heart, you'll kind of look back later in your career and you'll be like, I'm glad I didn't settle. I'm glad I asked one more question, and I'm glad I just didn't sit still because everything around me was moving, and sitting still was the worst possible option.
Couldn't agree more. Sharon, awesome. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Later.